Penny Dix with you here again. So, today I'm going to be digging into the realms and doing my best to understand male psychology. Now, I think that men have received quite a bad press over the years, especially over the previous kind of generation. And I remember a book that came out quite a few years ago, probably 20 or 30 years ago, which was called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, to indicate that basically neither sex think the same, never will do, and will never understand each other. And I have a feeling that maybe for both sexes, that became a little bit of a kind of an excuse to not even try to understand the other. So what do I mean by that? Because, I think, as I said, men have had a bad press. And actually, do we really both come from different planets? I mean, we don't on one level, because we have to live together and we actually really need each other. And I think one of the problems has lain in the fact that women expect men to think like women. And men actually just can't fathom us. And do you blame them? But we need to go back to the early development of man. We need to go back to how men are as boys and how they are brought up by their parents. Because this, if as a woman we take the time to really try and understand what goes on for a man and how he develops, it may actually help us to form better relationships and actually stop blaming them for everything, because maybe we have a part in that. So what do I mean by that? Well, the way the mother brings up the child is going to determine how that child turns out. And all children want to, in most cases, please their parents. So you tend to get this idea where you've got fathers with daughters, mothers with sons, and the idea that has been around for many, many, many years is that men tend to look for women who are like their mothers, and women tend to look for men that are like their fathers. But how true is that? And doesn't that depend on the role model that we've been set? Because, I know examples where women have certainly gone for the opposite, perhaps, of their father, and likewise men have gone for the opposite of what their mother was like. So let's just think about this, because men actually, they do in a sense want the same things as women, but they see it in a much more simple kind of way, in the sense that what they want to do is they want to be loved. They want to play. Men are competitive. Men like sport. Men like achievement, which is not to say that women aren't, but it's not the same thing for women. When women get in the playground at school, they form little groups and they get very close to their girlfriends and they share secrets. Now, boys don't do this. Boys, when they're in the playground, they want to play, they want to compete, and they want to achieve, because that is what their makeup is. And also because men want to show mummy how clever they are and daddy how clever they are, in very kind of, basic terms. Now, men, as I'm sure you've discovered when you go into relationships, what happens is that I think as a woman, we expect men to think like us, and they don't. They don't think like us at all, which is not to say they don't want to understand us. I think they do really want to understand us, but I think women make it far too complicated for themselves. And I think we overcomplicate how men are in the first place, because men actually show their love as a verb. Men show their love by doing. They show you they love you. They don't have this this need to express some kind of romantic gesture. They may do if they think it will help, but it's not really where they're coming from. For example, if a woman expresses love and shows it in her sort of her body, she will go, she'll go to her heart. Oh, I love you. I love you. I can, I feel it here. Whereas a man, if he feels that he's sort of showing love and he's showing happiness, he kind of lifts himself up and he raises his shoulders and he's going to he's proud that he is happy and that he has achieved something. They don't see it in the same way as us. So, if a man wants to actually watch the film that you want to watch, which is really not his cup of tea, that's actually an expression of love. And as long as there's that to and fro in a relationship where you will also let him watch the motor racing or whatever it is, or the football, then, that mutuality can be reached. So let's look at also what happens with men. I think as a woman, we expect them to, as I said, think the same way and to go into their feelings. Men really are I think they find it very difficult to get into their feelings. And this is not a criticism. It's just that they're designed to find solutions to problems. They're not designed in the same way that a woman's brain is, to go all around the houses, up and down all the hills to find the solution. So if a woman goes to a man saying, I can't solve this, I don't know what to do. Now, if she goes to a man, he will try and find the solution. If she goes to her girlfriend, the girlfriend will listen and go, oh, I know. Because often what happens is a woman just wants someone to listen to her, but a man, to show his love and his care and his concern, he wants to solve the problem for you. And that's where it gets a little bit difficult for men and women, because we're coming at these things from different angles. So let's see. So what about our expectations? The expectations women put on men. How can they possibly live up to these expectations? Because on some level, on some unconscious level, we're expecting them to be like, if we've had a good role model of daddy, then we want them to be like daddy or father or papa. Or if we've had a bad role model, a woman may tend to go for somebody who is a little bit like that, or she might try to run away from it. Now, I want to get on to another really important sort of difference when men are actually growing up and their psychological development, which is often what happens in childhood, is men receive, in a sense, a kind of symbolic wound, a wound to their ego. Now, this may be because men as boys will be trying to, show how clever they are and that they can get to the top of the castle, that they're king of the castle. So they will try and do this. And at some point, somebody will say something that absolutely wounds them to the core. Now, for every young boy growing up, that's going to be different. But in a sense, it's a boy's first experience of discovering that, that he can't always perhaps be the winner. So it may be, I can tell you an example actually of something that happened to my own father, and he's no longer around. But I'm sure he wouldn't mind me using this as an example, because it's only in recent years that I've really understood what he meant by it. And I don't think he ever understood what he meant by it, which is a shame. But he used to talk a lot about an experience that he had as a boy, where he burst into his mother's bedroom. And bearing in mind, my father was in his 70s when he died, and he's been dead nearly 20 years. So we're going back into the sort of like 1930s, probably, I guess. And he burst into his mother's bedroom, and she was in there with another lady friend. And the lady friend was helping her into a kind of a gown, and doing up the zip at the back. And the woman shouted at my father as the young boy and said, "Get out of here, you dirty boy. Don't you know you're not allowed to see your mother in her underwear?" Now, that, for my father, I believe was the wound he experienced. So there was something probably through that wounding that made him retreat into himself and sent him into a place where it was very difficult for him to ever connect with that kind of otherliness of life, with that the sort of the spirituality of life. He'd been told that the one most natural thing that he loved, his mother, that he couldn't have anymore, that she was taboo, that she was certainly not to be seen. And so, of course, what it did also was it awakened him to the fact that there was a sexuality here. There is a difference between the sexes. So, my father used to recount that story many times through life and how he felt it had really damaged him. Now, some men will perhaps have been told by their fathers, say, that they cannot follow the career of their choice, that they must have a responsible job and a job that's full of security. And so this passion and enthusiasm that a young lad has of, but I have these dreams and these passions, and I want to, build planes or climb mountains. And the father comes along and squashes that. And this is very damaging for man's psychology. And I think at this point, it's possibly where men start to withdraw and not show their enthusiasm or their feelings in the same way again, because the fear of having their ideas and their hopes and their dreams, just basically squashed is too terrible. So what I want to say today is that there's a story that I'm kind of leading up to, which I'm not going to tell the story today, because I think I need to do a little bit of the background work on just understanding men a bit before we get to that point. But the story, just for you to kind of think about before we meet in the next video, is there's a story called The Fisher King and Parsifal and the Holy Grail. And that's the story that many psychologists and psychoanalysts have used to describe male psychology. And the beginning of the story is about a deep wounding that man receives. And when men are wounded, when they're deeply wounded, they can never really be completely fulfilled. You will find this in therapy with men that are unable to actually be in touch with their true feelings, which again is not a criticism. It's just they cannot get there because it may be fearful for them that they will get lost. They will get totally lost in that. And what can happen is that they become isolated, lonely, and depressed. Now, apart from the wound that never heals, there is a way to heal it, and that comes in the second part of the story. And I will go into the story in more depth in the next couple of videos. But there is this search for the Holy Grail, and we have to try and understand what that means. What does the Holy Grail represent? Why do men want to find it? It's from a myth, and myths are about truths. They're about truths of the psychology of men or women or both combined together. And the thing with the Holy Grail is that one has to ask the right question of it. And the question that I'm going to leave you with today is about, for whom does the Grail serve? Because there is something about how we serve each other in life that gets left out. We place our own agendas so often in the way of the other and the potential relationship that we don't actually see that we could say to the other, and how may I serve you? So I'm going to leave you with that. It's just a little introduction to my explorations into masculine psychology. And I'll tell you more in the next video, and I'll bring in a few more interesting little stories to help us actually uncover. And what we need to do actually is really learn to love men and accept them as they are, because actually really they're not so bad. They're okay. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video, which will be in, I'm just going to find my, there we are, all this technology. Okay, so thank you once again so much for being here today. If you haven't seen this live, or if you want to see it in catch up, it will be available on my page, and it's also going to be available later on YouTube. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your presence today. Thank you.